Welcome to this week's installment of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale with Don Henniger. I'm Don. With me is my podcast partner and a man who always has the inside dope on Scottsdale.
I thought that given today's guest, you were going to call me your doobie brother.
Doobie went by once or twice, but I'm thinking, no, man. So. When I think of you, I think of dope.
Okay, what was it?
Kind of goes together.
What was it again?
You got the inside dope.
Inside dope. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, that was kind of middle down the road.
Well, the reason we're talking about inside dope is we're not measuring Kevin's intellectual ability. Instead, we're going to talk today about the local cannabis industry. To do that with us is our guest, Greg Dunaway. Greg lives in Scottsdale, and he's the managing partner of Maple Creek Consulting. That's a strategy and marketing company, a communication shop. He's got clients all over the world in the cannabis industry, also partners with clients in other industries too. But today we're going to focus a little bit on the cannabis industry as it relates particularly to Scottsdale. So Greg, welcome, man. Good to see you today. Thanks for being here.
Hey, really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys having an active interest because I can tell you, Scottsdale has, I think, just like any other town, any other city across the world where I do business, there's a vested interest in doing it the right way, and I'm eager to talk to you guys about it.
Awesome, us too. We're going to back up for 1 second though and talk about doing it the right way. All three of us had spent some time at the WM Phoenix Open tournament this year, and it was unlike any other tournament that we've seen here for many different reasons. And now we all know what happened there. The weather was all crazy and muddy and rainy, and alcohol sales got their usual boisterous self. Put that mix together, and we had some pretty nasty stuff that happened out there this week. So what do we do now? What do you think? I mean, Kevin and Greg, you guys were both out there. What did it feel like being out there this time?
Well, it was freezing. It was cold.
First time ever, right?
Yeah, I was really, really cold. But yeah, we saw some of the antics. We weren't there on Saturday, but we saw on the news all the crazy stuff. And I don't know. I guess the WM Open had a press release and was talking about how a lot of it was exasperated by the fact that normally those hills and that you'd sit on those berms and would be sitting areas, and they weren't available because of the mud. So everybody was kind of congregated in the cart paths and underneath what is protected area that you can get rained on. So it was more congested in areas than normal. So that was their kind of thing. But I don't know. Something's got to be done, right? I mean, the mayor's come out, made a statement. Several city council members have come out. There's been stuff on the news. We've got national press about this. Not good.
You're a marketing guy. Greg, what'd you think about all that?
So, I mean, here's the thing. There's always a funny dichotomy, right, between people who fly in for the Open and people like us. When I was telling you guys earlier, I go on Wednesday and that's it anymore. I've done it. Yep. I'm too old for Saturday. I'm too old for even for Friday these days. Yep. And here's the thing, right? The weather was the first time I've ever been hailed on, departing an event. But you have a reputation where, look, it's like, hey, if you want to have fun and let loose and have a golf tournament that's not like any other, you come to the Open, right? From a marketing perspective, that's a great draw, and it's going to raise a crap ton of money for charity. And it is, believe it or not, the ultimate goal of putting on this event is to raise a crap ton of money.
Totally right.
Now here's the rub, right? I think the real problem is that they've hit a situation where they're letting in way too many people. And if you have a combination where 16, I don't want to hear one golfer complain about 16. If you're coming to Arizona, 16 is the Thunderdome. Okay. I don't want to hear it. It is what it is, and 16 should stay as it is. That being said, a lot of the other stuff probably could be handled if crowd control were a little bit better. And frankly, if we cut down letting in 3.5 million people, I'm exaggerating, but you guys know, I mean, how do you ask a police force to regulate that big of a population? I don't really know if it's tenable anymore.
Here's my takeaway. I agree with everything you guys said. Kevin and I were out there at 16 on Thursday. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm like you. I don't go out on Fridays or Saturdays anymore either. Decades ago, that passed me by. But here's the thing I hope will happen. I think will happen. The Thunderbirds have always run a good tournament. This year got out of control. So I know that, I have every confidence to think they're going to go back and adjust and get the thing back on track, whatever it takes to kind of bring some, tone it down a little bit. But you talked about charities. Last year they raised $14.5 million for charities. And the Thunderbirds have been doing this tournament since 1987. And you know how much money they've raised for charities since 1987?
How much?
Almost $200 million.
Wow.
Into our community. And when you look about the impact of what that means, and we think about all the nonprofits that have benefited. I've been on the boards of several nonprofits that have gotten money through the Thunderbirds because of the Phoenix Open. So it does so much good for our community that I have every confidence to think that they'll get back on track next year and make some changes, and we'll bring this.
Well, what do you think
bring
those
this
changes
down
will
a
look
little
like? You think, like Greg said, reduced attendance?
Probably reduced attendance. Maybe they got to look at alcohol sales time. Can they get what time do they start selling alcohol? What time do they quit selling alcohol? I mean, things like that. I think are going to have to be part of what they get together. I mean, look at the crazy guys that go out there at 16 on lining up at 6 a.m. to do the run to 16. Alcohol sales start pretty early in the morning, right?
Yeah, I heard somebody make a suggestion they make it 10 to 3 or something like that.
Yeah,
seems reasonable, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, from a marketing perspective, you had guys flying in from London, right? I mean, let's all be clear.
Yep.
This is not, nor should it be, a boring Augusta tournament.
Nope.
We have concerts, we have fun. From a marketing perspective, you just can't take that away. But, I think there were on the, so I was lucky I had a pass, but I was on one of the shuttles to get in. The woman behind me had been pre-gaming since, 7 a.m. There was a contingency down at Coach House, and there always is. There's bars around here that are going to do it.
Sure.
Again, I think reducing crowds to the tiniest bit would be very, very helpful. And then praying, frankly, that we don't have a Mighty Mud Mania would be great.
Yeah, but let's do that somewhere besides the Phoenix Open.
Yeah.
So, Greg, we're here to talk about your industry today. I know you got a lot of good stuff to share with us, but before we start getting into all that, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got where you are today. You've got the marketing background, how you're representing clients in the cannabis business, and how you got to Scottsdale. Give us a little background before we start getting into it.
Yeah, for sure. So originally my background for college, believe it or not, was in film and television. So I thought I wanted to go down that road. Getting onto a movie set for a couple of 18-hour days disabused me of that notion pretty quickly. And then after that, I kind of was like, well, a national, or really natural, road for me is marketing. I went through kind of a couple of startups, one of which went all the way from, the journey of local Scottsdale business here that ended up becoming a company called Vera Mobility, where I started out when it was 35. It went from, private equity investment to SPAC to public. I saw that whole journey. So I did that. And then after that, as you can imagine, I was ready to do something almost entirely different.
Yeah.
And a friend and an investor in a local cannabis company said, look, at the time, I think I was probably 28, 29. Okay. He's like, look, cannabis is really taking off. Why don't you come to work marketing? Go work in a real small business. And I can tell you, there is no business like it. There is no regulatory structure like it. There is no how we are tasked with operating the rules that we have to follow. And from there, I stayed at that cultivation for a little while, learned the ropes locally here in Arizona. I was then recruited to join a firm that did international cannabis equipment sales, basically trying to transition to vertical farming in cannabis. So that brought me to areas of the world like all the way to Germany, to Spain, to sending a couple of my team members down to South Africa. And then what it also dovetailed into was a trip actually to the Middle East, because we have some interest in vertical farming, obviously in the Middle East, where they're dealing a lot with, food security issues. So I've kind of seen it all in terms of the international space. And now my current business, I run my own shop, as you mentioned so kindly earlier. I have clients here. I've mentioned, I run, I'm at the de facto CMO for a local cultivation here called Barrio Cannabis. And then I have clients that are based in Switzerland that are trying to come to the USA. So I'm really lucky to have a really diverse group of clients. And I've got clients that are, to keep myself sane, I take a few clients outside of cannabis. Integral Insights is a great startup that I've been working with. I'm working with a local businesswoman out here, Susan Drum. She's wonderful. But, the key element is that this business takes a little while to get used to. It really does take a while to understand the way that this business has to operate. It is unfair. It is an unfair way that the government has tasked us with running operations. And so we all have to adapt and I see my role as helping from a strategy, marketing, and even to a certain extent, biz dev and ops, helping these guys navigate that world.
Let me back up a little bit. Where'd you go to school?
Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles.
Okay. Yeah. So you grew up in California?
Yeah, I actually grew up in the Bay Area, south of San Jose, Los Gatos. Just got kicked in the chest watching the 49ers lose.
That's Kevin's team is the Chiefs. So
congratulations. I knew that. I knew it was going to come up. Yeah. That's twice now. But yeah, so I did that, and then moved out to Phoenix when I was about 8 or 9 years old. So
kind of grew up here.
Yeah, I grew up here. I'm the rare hockey player that came out of Phoenix. So my son plays hockey, and I absolutely love it here.
Yeah, it's cool. Hockey's become there's some good hockey players that come out of Phoenix area now. So
quite a few.
We're a hockey town now.
Hey, Austin Matthews, one of the best players in the whole NHL, local Scottsdale boy.
Maybe we'll build a stadium or an ice rink somewhere time. Put the team in a real stadium, right?
Yeah, God, don't get me started on that. Yeah.
So let's come back and dig back into the industry a little bit. Give us a little update, maybe a business 101 lesson on how the industry works and some of the challenges that you faced in getting things rolling.
Yeah, sure. So here's the most obvious one, right? Cannabis is federally illegal. Let me say that again. Cannabis is federally illegal. So what you have is illegal. It is illegal. Now, the government has issued a few directives saying like, hey, we're going to look the other way as long as it's enabled at the state level. But that really, really screws up your business, right? So as an example, you have addition. I don't want to go too far in a rabbit hole. If you're out there and you got your phone, Google it. 280E is a big one on your tax filings, right? We pay more taxes by far than an average business, and you look at. And we pay excise taxes, on whether you're a recreational patient, or recreational or medical. There's taxes that go into.
You're talking about retailers now, right?
Retailers, yeah.
Okay.
So we can focus in on like cultivation too. I mean, cultivation alone, you're looking at as an example. If Kevin over here is a dispensary and I'm a cultivation, let's say a huge plug, local Arizona, Barrio wants to deliver to Kevin. Well, we have to go out and have a certain person in a certain car. We have to have them actually print out a Google Maps, as in we can't use our phone, and show the exact route that we're going to take to Kevin's dispensary.
From Barrio.
In
Tucson.
Yeah, in Tucson. Right. And so when we serve Phoenix, so we've got to do all of this. Then someone from there has to come out. They have to make physical, as in paper copies of the delivery, notate the time, and then actually take possession of it. None of this is, really digital. This is all hard paper, right? And again, let's remember we're in 2023. So the macro level is federally illegal, totally difficult to run a business when you have all of this additional tax structure that's just penalizing your business for existing. And then the thing that kills me is when these politicians come out and they're like, even the ones that vote for cannabis, and they're like, oh well, they generated $40 billion, but I still don't like them. And it's like, really? Because those are paying for your roads and your schools. So again, I don't want to get too salty on a lovely podcast, but that's kind of an overview of why it's very, very difficult to navigate this space.
So let's start back to how you cultivate it. And so you've got a company in Tucson, Barrio Cannabis Company, where you actually grow.
Where we grow, yep.
You cultivate. So talk about how that got started and why Tucson, and give us a little background on that, and then how that product then becomes something you can then market in Phoenix.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So long story short, myself and a business partner, Justin Morrow, he and I have been together since the equipment days, and we got a call from someone who said, "Look, we've got a grow down here, and we're there's a process called white labeling, right? Let's think about it like a Kirkland vodka. Right. We know there's no Kirkland company that's doing their vodka, and that's essentially what they were doing with their cannabis. They were growing indoors, and they were like, we are sinking ship. Can you help? And so what Justin and I did was we brought a brand that we created. We brought in some new growing techniques, and again, indoor facilities. So envision the classic, tables, lighting, cannabis, in 17 different rooms with a bunch of different, types of cannabis growing there. That's one thing people always ask. Hey, Don might ask me, how is this cannabis going to affect me? Can't tell you. There's 1,000 different strains out there. Right. So what we try and do in our new business model is we try and delight our customers with different strains that they might find anywhere else.
Sure.
So the reason for Tucson was simple. We were asked to come in and, we kind of caught lightning in a bottle. We really did. There is a market, and I think it's actually very interesting, to think about Scottsdale, where there's a very high dollar value, citizen, I guess. We grow premium cannabis. It's not the cheapest cannabis. For 4 gram jars, we're looking probably between 45 and 50 for 4 grams, right? So we know what we're doing. We're growing high end cannabis, and we're really lucky. It's really taken off, and we get to serve in Scottsdale, and I still get to live here, which is great.
That's fantastic. So what's the volume you get out of Barrio? How big an operation? How big is the growing area in Barrio, and what kind of in terms of volume, what kind of production do you have there?
So we're looking right now probably at, and I should really grab my phone because I have it on there, but just ballpark, 2,500 1,500 square feet of canopy. And that's the most important thing, which was how much canopy can you grow? You can have buildings that are enormous and those are really what you want to focus in on is canopy. And then, the next major question is, what are your SKUs? Are you growing flower? Are you growing for a vape? Are you doing that internally? And again, for us, our market, our niche, a good friend of mine says the riches are in the niches. Is we really focus on premium flower. So, an average order for us out of those jars for a month, or even maybe once every 2 weeks, would be about 1,000 units would go into a dispensary.
Okay.
And so, again, the way the business works is the wholesale price is the wholesale price and the retail price is the retail price. And so, again, it's a very time intensive, hard process. But if you find that niche, you can really, really make an impactful product.
Kevin, it sounds like it's like a farming operation.
Yeah.
But just with the product is cannabis instead of some produce, right?
They're using agricultural techniques, right?
Exactly right.
Okay, so here's a question I have. The whole reason I wanted to have somebody from the cannabis industry on this podcast, because this is a Scottsdale podcast.
Let's do it.
And you're going to confirm or deny or, not confirm something that my theory I have or thought I had. And that is, so here I am, we're looking at the cannabis industry. I'm reading all this information about growth in the industry and sprawling growth and tax revenues and all that stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, I bet you Scottsdale is a little bit of a restrictive market. Is that confirmed or am I wrong?
You are 100% right. And a lot of what city governments have done, I'll start macro and I'll get back to your question, I promise, has been they'll essentially say, here's a green zone. And we're okay with you cannabis folk. You go over there to these.
Now, those usually like industrial areas?
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah. And they'll say, hey, there's nothing over there. We don't give a crap if you guys hang out over there. But what Scottsdale in particular has kind of said is that the dispensaries that exist, that I'm very fond of, again, Soulflower, McClintock, or you look at, there's one up in Scottsdale near, actually I think that's on the res. So, they're very few and far between to service our area. What they've essentially said is, hey, we're good on dispensaries. And hey, you know what? We think, we actually think we're good on cultivation as well. We're good. We don't want anymore. It's kind of echoes of the position we were laughing about earlier that Gilbert has taken, which is we really don't want any of you cannabis people.
So Gilbert,
period.
They're locked down in Gilbert.
Yeah, no, but they just flat out aren't interested.
So, but Scottsdale has a couple, but not very many. So how did those couple get in? Were they do it before there was a different city council, or did they change their minds halfway through, or what?
I think there's a combination of things. Obviously there has been a changing dynamic on council. I would be, I think we alluded to, there was a big fight about zoning about 2 years ago that got pretty ugly when there was a lot of money that was kind of saying, look, we've got people down here in what I call Scotts Vegas who are out, starting fights and stabbing each other. But that's okay. But I guess you guys draw the line at, a nice lounge with, a lot of these, especially some of you guys have been into them, a lot of them look like Apple stores. Depending on where you are, if it's a high dollar area, there's a guy who's going to greet you, walk you in, take your hand, and walk you essentially through a cannabis Apple store. And for whatever reason, council does not appear to see the value in that, despite the fact that most of these dispensaries are employing with good jobs, 40 to 70 people, just depending on the...
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so 40 to 70 people, just our friends over at, Justin was doing an education over at AZ Organics over in Glendale. I think and they asked for a bunch of Barrio shirts. So I'm sitting there doing the count or whatever. And they had like 45 to 50 bud tenders that were like, hey, we'd love a shirt, right? And I'm sitting there going in my head, like, again, these are really good paying jobs. I haven't even touched cultivations. Our cultivation is probably the smallest you're ever going to see. And we're employing 25 to 30 people.
Really?
Yeah. And this building is maybe 3 times the size of this one. So, long and short of it is, I'm not going to sit here. I love the city council. I love everything. I wish that I'll leave them my number. Call me. I'm happy to take them on a tour of some dispensaries. I'm happy to take them on a tour of some cultivations. This is not, and what I'll leave you with is this, which on this topic is, one of the things we need to recognize is that who are cannabis customers? Police officers, teachers, doctors, our veterans. I have literally watched every single demographic come through that door. I mean, it's so I'll kind of stop on my soapbox there.
So isn't there a state law that basically says cities have to allow a certain number of dispensaries? I thought that was part of the problem in Scottsdale a couple of years ago, where the cities don't necessarily have the right to be able to say no to cannabis, period. They may make it hard, and they could.
So, Don, do you think the city let a couple in just to be compliant?
No, well, maybe, but I think with the cities, where the cities can play a part towards your green zones, they can determine where they go.
Of course,
But
absolutely.
I thought there was a state law that said if there's a certain number of cannabis dispensaries that a city has to be obligated to accept if somebody wants to put them in.
I will give you a really good. This will give us a really good. What we can all check back in here in a year. Ready?
Yeah.
So the state issued a bunch of what's called social equity licenses recently.
Yeah.
And those were for people who had been disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs. So here's what I would say. If our theory, which is the Greg theory, my theory is that I think that the Scottsdale City Council has kind of said, hey, we're just not going to approve any further dispensaries or cultivations. None of those new licenses will ever see the light of day in Scottsdale. Now, if I'm wrong, and I would love to be wrong, guys.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. If I'm wrong, then we will see some of those social equity licenses get through in the Scottsdale. To date, I have heard of none.
I'm thinking more of Gilbert, because you said there's nothing in Gilbert.
There isn't.
Is Gilbert obligated legally at some point? If somebody wants to come into Gilbert and open up a cannabis dispensary, are they obligated to figure out how to make it happen?
From the few phone calls that I made before appearing here, the general consensus has been that Gilbert does not and will not, and going forward will never, with the current makeup, approve any kind of cannabis licensing. So, and I also don't think you're going to see much force from the state at this stage to really engage, even if there were written that way. Your next guest should be a lawyer who's probably fought one of these cases. But this morning I was talking to a guy.
Chris May is going to sue the city of Gilbert.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to a gentleman who was a buyer for an unnamed. We'll just leave it unnamed. And he was laughing with me this morning, and he was just like, it'll be a cold day in hell before Gilbert approves a dispensary right now, and if that's the prevailing attitude with a guy who's buying it on average, call it $2, $3, $4, $5 million of product a month, I would say I always like to listen to the people on the ground.
Makes sense.
He would know.
So how many dispensaries are there in Scottsdale? Do you know that number off the top of your head?
Man, I mean,
it's not a lot,
It's not a lot. I mean, so we were laughing earlier because I got it wrong. The Sunday Goods on Scottsdale Road is technically Tempe. You were right about that.
And so's Soul, because they're South McClintock.
They're South McClintock. So, but they all go by. They all want to put Scottsdale in their name.
Oh, do they?
Which gives you an
everybody does.
Everybody does, right? So there is one. And again, I don't know how do we do it in Arizona? Do we say that the reservation is technically Scottsdale? I believe we do when they put their address.
So which one are you thinking about on the reservation?
There was a MedMen which has been bought up near Pavilions.
There's one right off Via de Ventura.
Via Ventura.
And that's on this side of the road, so that's in the city of Scottsdale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what's one.
Where's that at?
That's near right off Via de Ventura and Hayden.
Oh.
Yeah, it's closer to Pima. There's a post office. Right behind the post office over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I happen to have frequented there, so I've seen that before.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go.
That's Scottsdale.
So that's Scottsdale. So we've collectively come up with one.
Like Curaleaf has one on the corner of
they've got
Frank Lloyd Wright and Greenway.
Yeah, they've got one up there. Curaleaf has one, so we've gotten to two.
It's a handful, basically.
Yeah, I would say I would be floored if it's over 5.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah. And I do want to throw it out there. I'm very sure that the Salt River Pima has also approved.
Okay.
They would say Scottsdale, I think, in their address, right? So, but again, if you're talking city limits, I would guess less than 5. I mean, certainly we don't do at Barrio, we don't do business with any of the Scottsdale licensed ones.
Really?
What's the financial climate look right now? Because you've had a tough time convincing banks and traditional lending institutions to invest in the business. Is that loosened up a little bit now that we've been a couple of years into it?
You know exactly the questions to get me fired up. So, so we have been begging, and I mean we as the collective cannabis industry, we have been begging our national government to pass something very simple called the Safe Banking Act. This is a very, very simple bill. It basically would allow the banking industry to treat cannabis like any other business. I can tell you guys, I just was working with my Swiss client. I talked to 7 different banks, 7, local, national, all of them, just taking the temperature again, being like, hey guys, I know this is likely going to be a no. And of course they were like, would love to take your business. It looks like you guys are going to generate a lot of revenue. Well, you're too risky. Oh, what's the risk? Oh, well, until the feds pass safe banking. So here's how that cascades out. That's why this is such a hard industry to go into. 1, you want to start a business. Okay. Good luck calling up Bank of America. You want to start a business and you want to just have a checking account. Good luck calling up Wells Fargo. Go find a local, maybe a local regional will take you. Now, here's the problem with that. A lot of them will charge you outrageous fees just to open up a checking account.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So there's that issue. Now think about it from just if you wanted to be an innovator, an entrepreneur. At the cannabis the company that I was at that was doing equipment sales, we had our bank account shut down 2 times. Let me tell you why that's awful. First, it's awful. Second, we weren't touching the plant. We were in there, not unlike someone installing an HVAC. But because on our website, they said the reason we're shutting you down, we saw a cannabis plant on your website. So, when you ask me how are things, until our delightful national representation, passes that bill, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And that being said, it's a credit to the industry that we're putting up the numbers that we are putting up.
Seems like public perception has leveled out a little bit. So maybe a lot of the traditional, the bureaucratic stuff, the financial industry, a little bit behind that then, I guess, huh?
They flat out won't help us until the Safe Banking Act is passed. And for all of you people who are paying attention to the 2024 election, here's a little tidbit. Joe Biden has a card to play in his back pocket, which is he has asked the DEA and the HHS to reschedule cannabis. Why might he do that? One reason to do it is it's the right thing to do. The second reason he might do that is that a lot of people who are perhaps unmotivated to vote between the ages of 21 and 35 may say, hey, this is the guy that stopped people from getting arrested and thrown into jail for cannabis, which, by the way, just so we're all clear, in certain states still happens, which is just completely unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Oh. It's definitely becoming more mainstream. Scottsdale Community College has a certificate degree program in cannabis business fundamentals.
That's right.
So you can go to SEC and get certified on cannabis business fundamentals.
I bet you didn't see that 5 years ago.
I'm sure you didn't.
Right.
No, so that's a thought. There's a sign.
Oh, it's great.
People are catching up to the industry as it grows and becomes more mainstream. Right?
Arizona, let's be clear. Arizona, when we talk about the national market, Arizona's phenomenal. But to do what we did in Barrio would not be possible in other markets. And I love it. I think we did it right. I think that there's a good amount of licenses out there. I like the way that it's structured, even though it can be very prohibitive because, an average license is going to go for, call it, I don't know, last time I checked, maybe $7 or $8 million. But, on the other hand, there's good jobs available. It seems relatively healthy. And I think the most important thing is that we're generating a substantial amount of tax revenue for the state that I think even your most, call it cynical, and I'm not even going to pick a side here, we'll just say cynical politician would say, you know what, those dollars are doing a lot of good.
Have you guys figured out what that number looks like in Scottsdale from a sales tax per standpoint, or other taxes? Have you guys kind of put that together? Is there a way to get?
So at the end of every year, it's all reported out, right? Okay. So the state actually, and we can all, dear listener, go ahead and get that phone out, and you can Google at the end of every year. The Arizona Department of Health, and so they're the ones that regulate the industry, Arizona Department of Health, AZDHS. But then you would also have the Arizona Department of Revenue, and they put that number out every year. Every single year since it's been legal, they've put out the tax revenue. And I think right now we're probably seeing it leveled out. I think it's probably going to be a lot of repeat business. We add Cannabis Curious I used to be a lot cooler at parties when I would go because everyone would come up and go, you're in cannabis. And now I'm getting cannabis curious from a different age range. And frankly, it's the 45 to 65 crowd that's kind of like, hey, well, wait a minute, I've got, and I'm not a doctor, so this is not a prescription, but hey, I have trouble sleeping. Hey, I've got some arthritis, or hey, I just don't want to drink wine anymore, which is rare, but it happens. So, I think you're going to see every year, you'll see a very steady, continued slight growth in cannabis.
Kevin, there's a bill, or at least a movement out the legislature right now to legalize psychedelic mushrooms.
Really?
for medical purposes.
Really? That's a lot of talk about that.
So that's kind of how cannabis started. Remember, it was a medical deal and it lasted for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I don't know where this bill is going to go. It's just a current event right now. But that whole notion of people to start talking about psychedelic mushrooms to treat medical problems and conditions, and all of a sudden, just the thought we're having those conversations is somewhat groundbreaking from what we've been used to in Arizona.
Absolutely. That's groundbreaking. I mean, I've been hearing a lot and reading a lot and listening to a lot of podcasts about that industry, but I didn't know there was something in the legislature.
We're going to need a new glossary. Bud tenders.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say. I have
Cannabis curious.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
I will jump on my soapbox one more time. Here we go. So I will tell you the following. I have one psychedelic client. That client has provided me, look, I'm one of those people who happens to believe that if you want to go, take mushrooms on your own time and hang out and chill out, by all means, go ahead. However, I will say this. The Johns Hopkins studies that are out there that are showing what psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in what we would call mushrooms, are doing, the efficacy numbers are astounding. And I can tell you this, I believe that psilocybin will have an easier pathway getting legalized federally than cannabis ever did. And you know why?
Why?
It's because we treat our veterans like crap. And they are afflicted with an astounding rate of PTSD, and it's hard to treat. And with the numbers that we're seeing out of very reputable universities about what psilocybin can do, and to an extent, I don't want to speak too much on it because it isn't my area of expertise, but what I have heard about MDMA treatments as well, with a supervised psychologist who's out there doing the follow-up treatments. I hesitate to use the word miracle, but it's astounding. And I encourage everyone, including you guys, go out. Don't take my word for it. Google Johns Hopkins. Look at the data, because the efficacy numbers about what we could potentially do for PTSD and other ailments in this country are really, really astounding.
I've got a good friend. Her name's Dr. Sue Sisley, who's been leading the effort.
Sue.
Yeah, you know her, John. I figured you probably know her.
Yeah.
She's been leading this effort for 5-10 years on trying to bring these things together to help vets out.
Yep.
And I'll bet she's probably been one of the leading forces to really advance the whole industry in Arizona and elsewhere. She's in Colorado and a bunch of other places too.
There is money. There is, what's the best way to put it? Because I don't like the idea of, a lot of people say, money, corporate bad. I don't look at it like that. I would say this, there is money poised to help that industry develop. And I've been at conferences, I've talked to investors. California, I believe, will be the leader in terms of once California, and it has enabling legislation for clinical, I guess, prescription of psilocybin, I think you'll see a lot of things drop. And now the feds, they move slow, but I also know that the feds have irrefutable data that this is helping people and they have a problem and they need to address it.
Yeah, good points.
What is the, now that it's legalized in a lot of, how many states do you think are going to have legalized cannabis?
Man, it's up there now, man. Like
Is
20,
more than half?
I think I saw 26 at one point.
like
Maybe I'm
26,
wrong.
27, something like that. 20, the outliers are the weird ones are Texas. Texas is always weird. Their state legislature is bizarre. You've got South Carolina. You've got, hell, even Mississippi has medical cannabis. I mean, so you've got a lot of it. The ones that are the holdouts are really at this stage kind of oddballs.
The heavy red states?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, and you have some restrictive medical. I mean, Hawaii, for example, has a medical program, but they're really struggling with how to do enabling recreational legislation. They'll figure it out. Trust me, once the will is there are a lot of blueprints to follow. I mean, hell, you've got New York, which is a total, we're not going to cuss on this show, but a total S show in terms of how they've rolled out their program. And they should have the most lucrative, or one of the most lucrative programs out there. So there are some interesting ones. I don't want to paint a blanket brush about just saying red states, because there are other ones that I think have their own issues. But, frankly, the majority of it is if you're flying to a major city in the United States, usually you're going to see a rec program, and if not, at bare minimum, a medical program.
Yeah, for sure.
Look at Oklahoma. I mean, hell, I'm going to give a credit to a red state because I just kind of took a pot shot.
True.
Yeah, Oklahoma.
Well, I'm from Oklahoma, where my family's from Oklahoma, and I've been to Oklahoma a lot recently, and actually, it's interesting they have waited there because they must be giving out licenses they're like candy. Because I go to these really small communities where my family's from, a really small community. There's 6 dispensaries in a town of 3,000 people.
Wow.
So in the industry, we joke that when you get off the plane in Oklahoma, they hand you a license. So that state, I would say, with all due respect to our dear friends in Oklahoma, not tenable. That's
not sustainable.
That's
Right?
Too many. Right?
There's too many, and frankly, the demand isn't there. And we can take a detour on a different podcast. There's probably some reasons where maybe that cannabis might be escaping state lines and going to other states that perhaps are not legalized. But again, with their model, I don't believe will be sustainable.
Well, let the market work those things out too, right? So that sooner or later, the market will rule everything in terms of demand, supply and demand.
It will.
Back to the basics.
It tends to, with the exception of international cannabis, which we probably don't have time for on this, that the market tends to suss things out.
Good conversation today. Kevin, we learned a lot about the business, didn't we?
I always wanted to know, how Scottsdale handles this thing.
Yeah, good to know. But Greg, great catching up with you. Thanks for all the work you're doing. Thanks for enlightening us with all that's happening in a business that we kind of didn't really know that much about. So it's really, really informative to what you brought to the podcast today, and I appreciate all the time and effort you put forth for that. Thanks so much, man. Yeah.
Hey, thank you guys for having me, and I hope, if nothing else, if you're a cannabis skeptic, don't be. We're warm and friendly.
There you go. And thanks to all of you for listening. We'll see you next time for another episode of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale.